Welcome to Soccer Morning on NASN. Here's your host, Jason Davis.
Happy Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network. Jason Davis here with you. Tribe Called Quest to open the show, courtesy of Isaac in Pittsburgh. Thank you very much for that. For your support, Isaac, and for the music today. You guys will enjoy it. Very footy-themed musical selections from Isaac in Pittsburgh today. Big show on the docket on a Tuesday. Tuesday shows, they tend to be big. I don't know. I should go back and look. What's our record on Tuesday? Because that's one of those things about sports, right? And soccer doesn't usually happen on a Tuesday. We don't usually get soccer on Tuesday. You get Wednesday games, Thursday games, weekend games. No Tuesday games. Unless it's like U.S. Open Cup or something. What else happens on Tuesday? Champions League on Tuesday? I've always think of it as a Wednesday thing. You're right. Tuesday and Wednesday. Apologies. Champions League on Tuesdays. That's true. That's true. So, you get that stat that like breaks down away games on Tuesdays in. So what's our record on Tuesday? Soccer Morning's record. I don't know. Big show today. Jonathan Tannenwald, the goalkeeper, will join us in just a couple minutes. We'll talk broadcasting as we tend to do with Jonathan. MLS deal coming up. ESPN plans for the World Cup. They are going to knock it out of the box. They're going to make it so Fox looks terrible by 2018 when they pick up the baton. That's what I got from Jonathan's articles on the matter. Michael Orr, Stumptown Philly, Portland Timbers writer, will join us to talk about the Timbers' first win of the season, what that means for their campaign. Can the Timbers fully turn it around, go on a run, maybe even challenge for one of the couple of top spots in the West? Because it's difficult to. This is MLS. Anything can happen. They could go on an epic run and be first place in a couple of months. That is possible. I doubt it, but it's possible. So we talked to Michael Orr about what that win over DC United on Saturday means for Caleb Porter and company. And then at 11 o'clock, big day, Joe Corona, Tijuana and U.S. men's national team midfielder, will join us. We'll talk to Joe about playing in Tijuana. This is the second Cholos player in a week. We had Hercules Gomez last week. If you missed Herc, go back and listen to that show. Not now, later. Do that later. Yeah, Tijuana Tuesday. That's right. It is. It's Tijuana Tuesday. I don't know. Was Herc on Tuesday? I feel like he was on a Wednesday. Dang. We screwed that pattern up. We could have had Tijuana Tuesday with two players from. No, it's great to have Joe Corona on the show. Excited to have a chat with him. Now, yesterday's happenings in the world of soccer, the headline, what happened to Liverpool at Selhurst Park against Crystal Palace? Up 3-0. Up 3-0. And the game did feel like, certainly the commentators were going on and on about this. I think it was Arlo White, right? It felt like Liverpool was going to try to push to really make that game a blowout to help their goal differential. So if they did finish out the season as they wanted to with 6 points, they'd have a chance to catch City. It was very unlikely they would ever catch City on goal differential, but you got to give yourself a chance. You got to give yourself an opportunity to go. You don't want to regret that you didn't push for more goals. But the problem was, and we've known this the entire season, despite Liverpool challenging for the title, we knew that their weak link was their defense. And they gave up 3. And they dropped 2 points from a winning position. And now it looks like, for all intents and purposes, this title is City's to win. Is there any doubt in your mind that Manchester City goes on and takes this title? And is that ultimately anticlimactic? Does that disappoint you? I mean, there's still something to play for on the final day. Manchester City tomorrow, right? Manchester City playing tomorrow. Apologies, I don't have this in front of me. Let me check and see. They have to go. They have to beat. Where is my schedule? Oh, see, the schedule only goes to Tuesday. That's not good. Where's my Wednesday game? This isn't helping me. Manchester City, West Ham on Sunday. Villa, right? Okay. Apologies. Google failed me. Google, what are you doing? Should they beat Villa? And you would expect them to. I mean, look, anything's possible. Villa celebrating not being relegated. Not really good enough for Villa, but hey, nothing left to play for them. Safety is secured. What do they do against City? Go play spoilers against City. But again, you expect City to take care of the business. And on the field, after that match, after Liverpool had dropped points, after they were up 3-0 and ended up with a draw, Luis Suarez crying into his shirt. Steven Gerrard pushing cameras away, consoling Luis Suarez. And man, if Twitter's any indication, people really hate Luis Suarez. I mean, I get it. I'm not saying you shouldn't. But there was no compassion for Luis Suarez as far as I could tell. And anybody who did express some compassion for Luis Suarez, well, you really have to feel for Luis Suarez on a human being level, as he was crying in light of the fact that Liverpool probably lost the title. No, you don't, said other people. No, he's a racist and he bites people. And that's a reputation. He may score a ton of goals. He may be an amazing player, but we don't have to put those two things together. Good player and good person, or good player and compassion, good player and empathy. Nah. People don't like Luis Suarez. And by extension, some people don't like Liverpool. And I know a lot of people don't like Liverpool to begin with. It was not that I was rooting for Liverpool to win the title, but I was rooting for good stories, as I am wont to do. And let's be honest, Liverpool winning the title 24 years after their last First Division championship, having never won a Premier League title in that era, it would have been a story. It would have been pretty amazing. But this is the game. It punishes you for your faults. And in the end, Liverpool's fault was their defensive strength. They just didn't have enough of it. They just weren't able to stay locked in. And maybe we would have called Liverpool's title had they won it. And it's not, I guess, again, it's not over yet. It's very unlikely, but it's not over yet. Liverpool winning a title, would that have been, sort of not right? It would have struck you wrong. Because, again, defensively, and I know as soccer fans, our first instinct is we want goals. Give me some goals. Liverpool scores lots of goals. They deserve the title. Yeah, I got to be a little bit more defensive-minded, too. Brendan Rodgers has to find a balance. Did an amazing job this year. Nothing to take away. And you can't take anything away from Liverpool's season. No one thought they'd be here. No one thought they'd get this close. It's just a disappointment here. All right. Let's reset. When we come back, we will talk to Jonathan Tannenwald, the goalkeeper, Philly.com, about the broadcasting situation in the United States when it comes to the World Cup and MLS. I want to have to remind you here, soccermorning.com is where you can go to support the show, listener-supported program, as we are hoping to get our big NASN World Cup plans out to you very, very shortly. So be on the lookout for that. And again, thanks to Isaac in Pittsburgh for today's musical selections. Jonathan Tannenwald, just a second. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
We are passing around stories of all the things that taught us well. Yeah, they taught us well now. We've only got...
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, joined now via Skype from the Philly.com newsroom. I like saying this. That makes it sound really official. Jonathan Tannenwald, the goalkeeper on Twitter, our go-to guy for broadcasting rights issues, broadcasting plans, all of those things. John, how are you?
Doing well, thanks. I like your DJ this morning.
I know. It's good stuff. Isaac did a good job. All right, let's start with the ongoing negotiations, because apparently they still are, over the MLS rights post 2014. The word on the street months ago was that ESPN and Fox Sports were going to be the two broadcasters of choice or the two broadcasters to sign a new deal with MLS, which would mean the end of the NBC deal. We had a brief mention of the possible return of NBC Sports. Where does that stand?
Right now, I don't think it's going to happen.
Okay.
The NBC thing that I floated out there, I was told it by a couple of people whose connections I trust pretty strongly, and I wouldn't have done it if it had just, for example, come from one person. I was not comfortable putting it out there until multiple people had told me.
Okay.
And when I went up to New York on Friday, ESPN on Friday in Manhattan had this giant press conference with a lot of their senior executives and on-air talent and producers and so forth to promote their World Cup coverage and talk about their plans. And I had some conversations with people, both on and off the record, about the state of the Major League Soccer deal, and was told by a few folks that the NBC thing either wasn't true or didn't come to anything, depending on who I talked to.
Okay.
And
there's enough gray area here for it to be possible that somebody made a phone call or NBC said, well, wait a second, but eventually decided to go their own way.
All indications are that Major League Soccer will end up with ESPN and Fox for its English language rights when this is done.
Okay, so what's the holdup, John?
I don't really know.
All right.
And the things that I do know, I'm not allowed to say publicly.
All right, fair enough.
When I am allowed to say them publicly, I will put them out there. I would like to, but I'm actually not. Again, this is one of those things where I need to hear stuff from multiple people. I need to hear the same thing from multiple people before I put things out there.
Okay.
Sorry to disappoint the listeners, but that's sort of the way the job works.
That's fair. I completely understand. You're certainly in a position where there's no, If this is eventually going to happen, and right now all indication is still going to happen, we've had one report of a price tag by the Sports Business Journal. That price tag, is there any notion of how correct that might be? And is anybody talking about numbers right now?
No.
Okay.
That I don't. I haven't heard anything about price tag. I haven't asked about price tag. I certainly don't think the Sports Business Journal, which is often the news outlet that reports the value of rights deals, they're very rarely wrong. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to go guessing whether they're right or wrong. I'll take their word for it.
Now, one of the points of concern for MLS fans is the idea of going back to Fox, the idea of leaving NBC Sports, which has done an amazing job of presenting the league as a big-time sporting event. And for soccer fans who are rife with issues of self-doubt over the game in this country, we want to at least see the sport treated on a level playing field with other sports. And NBC did that. But NBC apparently is not going to be renewing their deal with MLS, and that means a return to Fox. We've talked about this before, Jonathan. Is there a reason to be concerned? And really, the MLS fan out there who's railing against this idea, is there any words for them that need to be said?
Yes, there are. I'm going to anger some of my listeners in the next few minutes, and I'm not going to apologize for it. Listen, it is not the job of Major League Soccer nor of television broadcasters to make you feel good about yourself. I have had a lot of readers come to me in the last week or two and say, boy, MLS should take less money and stay with NBCSN because I like their coverage more.
Okay.
And it hasn't always been that blunt, but that's been the crux of it.
Right.
They've done a really good job. They've, made it seem important. This is the other thing. If you want the salary cap to get up to $10 million a year, mm-hmm. if you want better players, more money on academies, stadiums, infrastructure, all these other things, and if you want the players to get paid more, at a certain point, you have to take the most money that is on the table. That is what every other sports league in the United States does, and that is what just about every other soccer league on the planet does. And the other part of that is Major League Soccer is not in a position where it can just pick and choose its national TV partners, whether they're because what you want or they're because what it wants.
Here's a question to kind of give some context to this, Jonathan. How long ago was it that MLS was buying time?
Oh, boy.
It's within the last...
I don't know the answer to. I know it's not in its current deals. But
no. But I believe we're talking about within the last decade or 12 years. I mean, that is, and that is a blip. Yeah. I mean,
And so was the U.S. national team, by the way.
Yeah, the landscape has changed to the point where MLS is talking about something close or within the ballpark of $100 million for all of their rights fees. Now, that does not sound like a lot when you talk about the NFL. Certainly, it's a drop in a very large rainstorm for the NFL. It's nothing compared to Major League Baseball. Certainly, local deals are very big there. It's nothing compared to the NBA or even the NHL. But it does represent actual, visible, concrete progress for a sport that has not ever really been able to put down the roots long enough to make this something.
And here's why: not enough people watch it on national television.
Right.
The leverage that the NFL has, and that the NBA certainly has right now, and that even the National Hockey League has, where every single major broadcaster is, charging to their door to try to get the rights, are the millions of people who watch every single game on national television. Mm-hmm. Major League Soccer doesn't have that. It's not the league's fault. I'm not trying to blame the league for this. They have some fault, obviously, and they would admit as much, that they still have a lot of room to grow. But there's the perception among a portion of the MLS fan base, and it is in that core, it is in that bubble, Jason, that you and I talk about all the time, that MLS is really important. It's not.
Well, okay,
and it's not. I'm not just talking about relative to the Premier League and the UEFA Champions League. I'm talking about the American sports landscape.
Sure.
And how American TV broadcasters judge how much money they're going to put on the table.
Yes.
MLS doesn't get to pick and choose where it puts its games on national television. If a national TV broadcaster doesn't want to put Major League Soccer games on, and another national TV broadcaster does, and is willing to put the money on the table, it is in Major League Soccer's interest to go that way, and the league is not going to get the money it needs to improve if it doesn't do that.
Yeah, look, there's a lot of looking a gift horse in the mouth when it comes to this. Now, I get why fans want to see, and maybe for some fans, the notion that this isn't a ton of money, and that MLS needs to be presented better to grow in a long view, that they want the presentation to be as good, whether the money is as strong or not. I mean, I can certainly understand the rationalization, but when we talk about NBC Sports, this is a two-way street. If NBC is saying, well, even if we're only going to pay $10 million or whatever it is, we're still not interested. We've got other stuff we're working on. We've got other things we're doing. Then MLS is out of luck. There's just nothing they can do.
But there's a philosophical point in play here of saying Major League Soccer should take less money.
Okay.
Because when you do that,
yes,
and this is not to judge Fox or NBC or anybody else. This is to judge the specific point of fans saying MLS should take less money. If you want MLS to become a bigger deal, if you want the money to be there to sign better players and pay the players more, and as I've said, put more into academies so that you're not losing players to Mexico, so that you can match the salaries that the Mexican clubs are paying the young kids in Texas and California and Illinois and elsewhere. If you want to do all of these things over time, you have to take the most money that's on the table. If you say, I want MLS to take less money, you are implicitly saying, or you're explicitly saying, I want MLS to remain a small-time thing.
Okay.
Because the money is not going to come from the owners in the long term.
Right.
Even if as the owners continue to get wealthier and more established, that money only comes from television, and that's the case in every sport in this country and most of the soccer leagues in the world.
Yes.
The money only comes from television. It does not come from the team owners in the long term.
There's also the small matter that you strike while the iron is hot because you don't know when it's going to cool down. And in this case, in this situation right now, MLS is looking at a landscape that places a premium on live sports because of a DVR culture, and also involves multiple networks trying to compete for market share against ESPN, who is a behemoth and is not going to probably suffer much damage from Fox Sports and NBC. But because Fox Sports and NBC have looked to carve out their own niche, NBC has stood to benefit, both in the last contract with NBC and in this next contract if it is Fox Sports.
That's right. And ESPN is going to look. The ESPN part of this deal is all but done.
Mm-hmm.
There are a couple of small things left to tie up. The people who I talked to in New York left no doubt that ESPN will continue its partnership with Major League Soccer for a long time. And let me read a few quotes here from some of those people, starting with the president of ESPN, John Skipper, who was a very big soccer fan and an advocate for Major League Soccer. And I would argue that it helps when the president of the biggest national sports network and the most valuable channel in all of pay television is a fan of your league.
Mm-hmm.
Quote, we've been telling people for 6 months now, I think, that we're on the precipice of getting a deal, and we are on the precipice of getting a deal. It's the longest I've ever been on a precipice, but we expect to be partners with Major League Soccer going forward. John Skipper, for those of you who haven't ever seen him on TV, is a very plain-spoken guy from North Carolina and has a sort of folksy way of saying things. So let me now turn to Scott Guglielmino, who's one of the senior vice presidents of programming. He's a key player in ESPN's negotiation with MLS. He's a guy who does a lot of the soccer acquisitions of properties and rights. We've been talking to them for a while now, and we think we've made a lot of progress. We certainly look forward to hopefully continuing our relationship. All I'll say is that obviously we have been working on it for a long time. It's relatively complex because you're looking at multiple partners, counting MLS and U.S. soccer here,
right.
and at a long-term deal. It has taken a little bit of time, but I think at the end of the day, certainly the end result will be something that MLS and U.S. soccer will be able to build on. Television executives are not always the most blunt people when they're in the middle of a negotiation.
Sure.
And if anybody listening out there is a lawyer or works in PR or anything like that, you would understand that what you say in public is not always going to be too blunt.
Right.
And it's part of why I'm not as worried as some of the other people are out there. I also, by the way, think that the people who say that ESPN underplays Major League Soccer or doesn't treat it with the respect that it deserves in their minds, again, speaking to the minority of the core fan base here, they're flat wrong.
Okay.
But you know, and they'll, as one of my commenters on my blog said yesterday, oh, there he goes being a shill for the industry again.
I saw that. I don't think you should worry too much about that, John.
Well, look, the guys who do MLS at ESPN are very public figures. Even the behind-the-scenes folks like Chris Alexopoulos, who's the lead producer, and Mark Connolly, who's been a part of ESPN's MLS coverage for almost since day one. I think you'd have a hard time convincing them that their company doesn't care for as forthright as they are out there and as much as they interact with people.
Okay. Let's turn to ESPN's plans for the World Cup, because that was obviously the reason that you were in New York and that they did their big spiel. They put a bunch of people on the stage. Every single one of them said the U.S. isn't getting out of the group, so that's fun. But this is going to be they're going to put on an absolute show, and obviously ESPN has the resources to put on an incredible World Cup. We saw what they did in 2010 as they tried to make amends for the mistakes of 2006, and everything that you mentioned in your story, and everything that came out of the mouth of the executives and the talent and the people behind the scenes is that this is going to be the best World Cup ESPN's ever done, and they are going to pass the baton to Fox and say, "Yeah, beat that."
Right.
Yeah.
They're gonna drop the mic. Is what they're gonna.
They're gonna drop the mic. ESPN dropping the mic. A bunch of white people in Connecticut dropping the mic. That'll be fun.
Look, it's as a soccer person, never mind any kind of specific soccer. It is great to see what ESPN is doing here. The scale of the operation: 290 hours of live television, every game on TV, online, and on the radio. 90 minutes of studio coverage every night. That's going to be very sort of conversational. They're going to have a dozen plus analysts only on the U.S. side, and then bring in some of their folks from Brazil and Mexico and so on and so forth. To sort of sit around the couch like they do on the ESPN FC show and talk about what they saw. What else am I looking for here? The quote that I walked out of there with came from Amy Rosenfeld, who is their senior coordinating producer for all things soccer. She's been producing soccer for ESPN since the 1999 Women's World Cup. She is, when I talk about people within the industry, she may well be the single most respected person in all of soccer television.
Okay.
And she said something that stuck with me, and I'll read this. Quote, "The best service we can give to all of you is in some ways to stay out of the way, but when we introduce ourselves to the coverage, it had better be damn good." And now I'm going to get myself in trouble because I think that was not only a compliment to ESPN, but a shot across the bow at their competitors.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. And look, I mean,
She didn't say, by the way,
no,
point about being a shot. That was me.
No, sure.
saying that, just to be clear.
I do look. I'm excited for what ESPN brings to the table. Obviously, 2010 was fantastic. In this particular case, not only do we get the backdrop of Brazil, the fact that this is the world's most passionate soccer country by most measures. Everybody's assumption is that Brazil is going to throw a party despite all of the stuff behind the scenes. And I don't know how much of a talking point the news of Brazil and the socioeconomic issues in the country were.
A lot.
Okay, and I know that they have said that they intend to cover that in whatever way is connected to the World Cup. Clearly, not only do we have that, but the time zone works out for the United States in a way that South Africa certainly did not, and this is an opportunity to sort of to set a new bar. But all of that being said, I have to come back to the fact that they were outbid for the 2018 and 2022 World Cup. I don't understand how that disconnect works.
I do. And I didn't put this in my story too much because I didn't want to go off on this tangent forever. The story was almost 5,000 words already. I thought that was close to enough. That had to do with how FIFA does the bidding process.
Okay.
It's not a back and forth. It is all of the various bidders put a number in an envelope.
Blind.
Right. It's a blind bid. And so nobody knows what the other's doing. And the bidding happened at a time when ESPN was retrenching just a little bit in terms of rights fees.
Okay.
So Fox also blew everybody's doors off.
Right. Well, that's what I'm assuming. Fox sort of number down that was probably ridiculous. I mean, probably off the charts because they knew they were going to have to do that in order to outbid ESPN. And ESPN, having a previous relationship, sort of knowing where the value lies, probably were more pragmatic
Honest.
About it. Go ahead. Yeah.
Honest.
Sure. But they also want to pay less. ESPN is looking to get some kind of value. I mean, they're not going to just outbid everybody because they want. This isn't the Olympics. Well, maybe it is the Olympics.
And here's the other part. It is a little bit the Olympics, but it's also a World Cup in Brazil is an awful lot more valuable than a World Cup in Russia and Qatar.
This is true.
If the U.S. had won the 2022 bid, I have a hard time believing that ESPN would not have thrown the bank at FIFA.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'm not saying they would have won.
Right.
But they would have put a lot more money on the table, I think. And Fox, you think about their greater sort of corporate parent with Sky and News Corporation internationally. Sky can't televise the World Cup in England and Germany. The U.S. is the biggest market that News Corporation has in which it can broadcast the World Cup.
Okay.
And now it's going to be able to. So I'm pretty sure this is, from that level, it's a big deal. How they execute it is going to be a different story.
Now, I am all for competition, and hopefully everything that ESPN does in 2014 will push Fox to sort of, I don't want to say get their act together because I don't think they're a disaster by any stretch. We are beyond the Michael Strahan years, I think. And the Champions League coverage may not be everybody's, favorite, but there's certainly some value there. It's just that I guess that it's a matter of committing resources. It's a matter of whether or not ESPN at this point doesn't seem to care whether the investment in the product is actually retrieved out on the back end, and they can afford to do that. Maybe Fox isn't looking at that way, and maybe Fox, because of the way the company is budgeted out and split up internationally, maybe that's part of it. I don't know. I am interested in some of the details of ESPN's coverage. You certainly have to go read Jonathan's piece at Philly.com, which I think he linked in a reply to Soccer Morning. So go find Soccer Morning on Twitter. One of the aspects, and you and I had a miniature back and forth about this yesterday. One of the aspects of ESPN's coverage that I find fascinating, and I'm going to say this up front, I am not saying that ESPN made the wrong choices, but one of the things I find fascinating is the move to the British voices almost across the board for their play-by-play coverage. Now, I know that Taylor Twellman's going to be doing commentary, and that's all well and good. But when it comes to the person narrating the game, Americans are clearly in the bag for a British accent. And I'm not saying that ESPN should have hired Americans, John. I'm just saying that we should recognize that we've been conditioned.
I think that's right. I think the market proved it 4 years ago. And that was John Skipper's point. He sees it as a meritocracy, and he sees it as, the positive reinforcement that they got 4 years ago versus the negative reinforcement that they got 8 years ago was different. And look, the stable of American voices is much different now than it was in 2006 or even 2010. And I would argue that the two top American voices out there, JP Dellacamera and John Strong, neither are ESPN's property, save for ESPN sort of renting JP Dellacamera for the radio broadcast during the World Cup.
Right.
They are Fox's property and NBC's property, and in JP Dellacamera's case, he also does the Philadelphia Union games. Let me read a quote from John Skipper, who, by the way, made a very valid point, which is that Ian Darke does a great job.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not questioning the competency of the people involved, and all of the voices are very strong. And I'll admit that I have some of the same conditioning that I am identifying here. I mean, this is a matter of every time I see someone say a British voice is better for soccer, it's not that I think they're lying or that they're wrong by their own perception. I just know that American soccer culture was never allowed to develop in any sort of vacuum in real terms. I mean, maybe you could argue that the NASL gave us a short window to do so, but it was never allowed to develop in any sort of vacuum on that level. And therefore, because of the ubiquitous nature of English soccer here, people connect soccer to an English voice. Boom, it's done. But there's also this part of it too. And let me say this first. In my experience, there have been the top. I would probably go about, and I don't mean to insult any of the people who I know in the industry. I would go 5 and at most 6 deep in terms of really good American play-by-play guys out there over a long term. Okay.
Going back 20 years.
Yeah.
Bob Lee, JP Dellacamera, and John Strong were the top 3.
Phil Shane's in that mix.
Phil Shane's in that mix, 4. I knew I was going to forget people. That's why I didn't want to get into too many details. But past that, Glenn Davis, Brad Feldman, Dave Johnson, Joe Tutino are guys who've been developed in the MLS era.
Yeah. And Cangelosi is okay for some people.
Steve Cangelosi might be the single most improved play-by-play voice in Major League Soccer.
I would maybe agree with that. I have to take a look at the whole league, but I agree. I would agree with that, yeah.
But the point, the stable is relatively small. And a lot of these guys have contracts where they can't just go work for ESPN tomorrow. So now we're getting to a point where by 2018, yes, we'll be ready probably to have a lot more American voices calling games. And the quality of their work will be high enough that it might silence some of the Eurosnobs.
But I don't think it matters. And again, it's interesting because I'm talking about this, and David Conrad on Twitter, David A. Conrad. It's not the accent; it's the quality of the call. My point is, David, that your assessment of the quality of the call is in part dictated by the accent. Look, there's a style to British broadcasting of a football match. I get that. People are in tune with that. All I'm saying is let's identify what happened, and I may be the man on an island here, but I will lament the fact that American soccer culture never got a chance to develop its own voices, who we now turn to as sort of a national, look, JP Dellacamera, I think, has been treated wrong in a lot of ways over the past decade or so. Yeah. Beyond that, we don't have a voice that people will turn to and say, this is the voice of American soccer. Phil Shane,
for a long time, JP Dellacamera, Phil Shane, and Bob Lee were it.
Yeah.
But only really Bob Lee got to the level of, for example, calling a World Cup final as he did in '98. But I'll say this about the current crop, and I don't just the quote unquote quality of the call. To me, is whether they've really done their homework.
Okay.
And Ian Darke, Adrian Healy, who's lived in the United, even though he has a British accent, has lived in the United States for a long time.
Certainly, yeah.
Arlo White, and Luke Wildman, who are probably
all excellent guys. Yeah, they're all
the
excellent.
top 4 or 4 of the top 5 in North America, in the U.S. and Canada right now, in terms of prestige and assignments and stuff like that, and quality. They do their homework, and they do it really well.
Okay,
and they deserve credit for that, I think.
Look, I mean, the Gus Johnson experiment has sort of put all of this stuff back into the focus, and I am not on board with giving Gus Johnson, a soccer neophyte, the job of calling Champions League games and potentially assuming that the World Cup in 2018. There's a middle ground there, and again, I think Americans are just conditioned, and I'm not suggesting ESPN hired the wrong people or should have hired more American voices necessarily. I mean, I want to see Americans succeed because I'm American, but I'm not going to say they did anything wrong from a business perspective, that they didn't turn to their audience and say, what do you want? And their audience said back to them, we want Ian Dark. We want these guys. I get that. It's just, again, maybe for a lot of people, it's not an issue for the soccer culture that we can have this cultural trading, and it's absolutely fine. For me, it's a little bit of an issue. I'm going to throw Bill Riley into the mix of quality American voices as well.
And he's new at this, relatively.
Relatively new. Yeah, I don't think he grew up with the game, but I think he does a pretty good job for RSL.
You talk about that middle ground, and I'm a big fan of Gus Johnson on college basketball. I think he and Bill Raftery are terrific. They call as much basketball as they want, because I'm a big college basketball guy, as people know. I don't think the Gus Johnson experiment is working as much from a PR perspective with Fox as Gus improving over time and having until 2018 to get it right. Because the reality is Fox doesn't have until 2018 to get it right.
Yeah.
They have until next year to get it right.
Right, Women's World Cup.
Because they have the Women's World Cup next year, and it's in Canada, and it's going to be a very, very big deal. And there's going to be a lot of conversation about who their talent is, what channels they put games on, how much are games going to be on Fox Sports 1 or Fox Sports 2, or will they put the U.S. games on Big Fox over the air, so on and so forth. The questions that they have to answer, everybody thinks, they've got until 2018 to get it right. They don't. They have until next year.
Well, they're also digging themselves a hole every time Gus Johnson comes on the air and people rip him apart at awfulannouncing.com and Deadspin or wherever else. I mean, I'm not saying that that's the entire audience. It's clearly not. But it's a significant portion of the audience, and it's the type of audience that will spread the opinion that they're failing at this job. All right, we're out of time, unfortunately. Jonathan Tannenwald from Philly.com. Definitely go check out his full pieces on the MLS negotiations and the ESPN upfronts about their World Cup coverage. Interesting things, the quotes from John Skipper and everybody else. Thank you for your time as always, Jonathan. Appreciate it.
Pleasure. I yield the floor to Michael Orr's cat, who is one of the biggest celebrities in cascading soccer.
All right, there you go. Michael Orr will join us to talk about the Portland Timbers and his cat when we come back. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV. Be right back.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, we turn now to MLS topics on the field with our friend Michael Orr from StumptownFooty.com and Soccer Made in Portland, the podcast you can find on NASN. Michael, how are you, sir?
Doing well. Thanks for having me.
And thanks for joining us. It's a nice day. We were just talking about the sun in Portland, whether it's out or not, but certainly is out for the Portland Timbers, who now finally have a win on their season. Michael, how big was that against DC United on Saturday?
Well, it was a big deal, mostly because it looked like the same old story, giving up a fairly late goal or, second half equalizer. Looked like it was headed for another draw. And, stealing the win literally in the last minute was huge. I mean, the Timbers needed a win in general, and DC, among the sort of little group of 3 games in this little homestand with the Galaxy and Columbus Crew coming up, DC kind of looked like the best chance on paper to get things started, and especially once Eddie Johnson was left out of the 18, it sort of was I hate to say must win, but it kind of was, and so getting it was a big deal.
Well, I imagine every game feels like a must win when you don't have a win this deep into the start of the season. And I wonder, look, it is very difficult to know how much that pressure actually matters. We know that Portland cares a little bit more about their soccer than a lot of towns in this league. Caleb Porter's an intense guy. I imagine that pressure to actually get a win, especially at home, because that's the failure you really care about, kind of redoubled. And it's DC United. I know they've been on a decent run recently, but it's still DC United. That had to feel very, very, the last couple of minutes there until Urruti gets the goal. I just imagine the entire stadium is holding its breath.
Yeah, and just sort of palpable frustration, as well. I mean, the previous 4 home games had all ended in draws, and it just seemed like it was going, like I said, for the exact same thing. And as you mentioned, it's DC United doesn't carry a lot of weight in Portland. I mean, there's just no real particular rivalry. Only play once a year. They hadn't been here obviously since 2012. So it seemed like it just kind of seemed like this game that was like, this is one that you're supposed to win, and if they can't even win this one, maybe this season is a little worse off than everyone thought.
Now we've talked in the past about perhaps Caleb Porter being inside his own head a little bit too much, perhaps getting a little too fancy and a little too, complicated with the way he wants to set this team out after having a successful campaign last year. Is that still the case in your mind? Do they still need a lead striker of a different sort than what they've got?
In general, I think yes, but I think in the short term, there is kind of another answer. And the main difference, and I think we've talked about this before too, but the main difference between this year and last, apart from the departure of Ryan Johnson, at least in an attacking sense, is the lack of a sort of a true left-sided player. Mostly through the injury to Rodney Wallace in the playoffs last year. He's still on his way back from ACL surgery. And then, they acquired Steve Zakuani, but he's been kind of slow coming along, recovering from injuries of his own, and picked up a few smaller ones along the way already this season. So, on Saturday, that was only the second time Zakuani's gotten to start, and the first time at home. And I think I'm right in saying it was his longest time on the field this season. And while he's not quite as explosive and dangerous as maybe his reputation, just because of how great he was before his obviously his really bad injury, he's still enough of a threat, and he certainly carries that reputation with him, and so he attracts some attention. And what Portland hasn't been able to do is keep somebody wide on the left, which just gives Valeri and Nagbe so much more room to operate and sort of switch places. They both kind of spent time in the middle and on the right, and they really let Portland just kind of assault DC's left side. And when DC finally reacted, sort of in the second half, all of a sudden Zakuani has 1v1 chances back on the left side, and nothing exactly came of them, but it sort of opened the defense up in a way that Portland hasn't been able to do very much this year. So do they probably need another forward option? Yeah, I think so. But Gaston Fernandez scored again. Maxi Urruti, found a way to score a non-spectacular goal, which was important. And, so they've got some production there, but I think in general they could probably use one more forward option to change things up.
No, like they scored 3 goals in this game. I mean, the issue has been at the focus has been on the attack, because that's what we expect out of a Caleb Porter team, and certainly what they made their name on, being first place in the West last season. But there are defensive issues, and we know there have been defensive issues. Footy Danso scored for both teams on Saturday, and I don't know, maybe that's a touch harsh on the own goal, because I don't know, that deflection could go off of anybody. But there's clearly some issue at least in the center defense, whether or not Jack Jewsbury is really that good enough on the right side. Where does the defensive issue stand for you?
To me, the need for a better central defender is more of a big deal than it is for forward at this point. I mean, I think Footy Danso actually, to the shock of some, including myself, just thinking back to the end of the 2012 season and how bad he was at that point, he's the most solid central defender they've got right now. Norberto Paparazzo was brought in the offseason. He was frankly bad.
Yeah.
And he's been benched, and Paul Moduka, while he had certainly a credible game against DC on Saturday, he's had some shockers as well. Some really, some people have said that, Norberto Paparazzo is basically the only reason that Kaw is still on the field. So, they could really use some help there. I think they're going to probably ride Jack Jewsbury out this year. Continue to ride him for the remainder of this season, not ride him out of town necessarily, because they do have Alvis Powell kind of waiting in the wings, the young international Jamaican right back. He's not ready yet, and I think they feel comfortable enough with Jack, that they'll probably not spend any time, at least in mid-season dealings, trying to figure that out. I think that the need is at center back more than anything. But the game on Saturday was a little bit better, as you mentioned, the own goal. It wasn't like Footy, passed it directly into his own net or something like that. I mean, it was
small victories.
It was not. I'm not.
This is the way you categorize that own goal. When it initially happened, people thought it was, I can't remember what DC player went up for it.
Christian
Fernandez. Yeah. That when it first happened, that was the first instinct was Christian scored it, not Danso put it in his own net. So there's that. That is
definitely. Yeah. It was 20 minutes later before I realized, they sort of announced that it had been changed to an own goal. And that was sort of maybe I wasn't paying enough attention, but that was the first I kind of understood that, actually Christian didn't touch it.
Yeah. Look, and again, it's not that Danso didn't have a good game overall beyond that. Certainly the goal helps. I mean, that's not what you pay a defender to do, but that helps. It helped them win the game in the end. It's that Portland has a complete lack of balance between the quality up front and the quality in the back, beyond maybe Michael Harrington, if you want to be positive about his contributions. So you can have Chara and Johnson on the field all you want, but if your central defenders aren't good enough, that's ultimately going to be the thing that kills this season.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if it'll kill the season, but what it does do is take away some of the options that Portland had going forward last year, because when the central defenders basically need babysitting, then that means either or both, I guess, but either the outside backs can't get forward as often, or Chara and or Johnson can't get forward as often. And so, they've had to manage that a little bit this year, and that's also taken away some of the opportunities that frankly they had last year, late runs by Will Johnson in particular. Now he did have a nice one, and Darlington Nagbe decided to put it in the side net, try an impossible shot in the second half instead of just drop it into Will Johnson, who was on rushing. So it's, those opportunities maybe are just being missed this year as opposed to last year, but there's definitely a sense that those central defenders need a little bit of extra help, and that's reduced the number of goals that other teams have scored against Portland in general. I mean, both goals on Saturday, one was an own goal and the other one was a wicked deflection off of Diego Chara,
right?
On Davey Arnaud's long shot. So, a little bit unlucky, I guess you could say, to give up those 2 goals. But that easing back has helped and helped the overall defensive ability to prevent goals. But it's hamstringing the attack a little bit.
You mentioned the mini homestand, the LA Galaxy and the Columbus Crew coming to town. What are the chances that Porter and the Timbers are able to turn this into something approaching a run that could get them back in the conversation? Because again, I said this at the top. While this has looked bad, they're still not that far down the table from everybody else because it's MLS. You get a couple of wins together, you're back in the playoff chase.
Yeah, I actually think that this win on Saturday against DC will propel Portland forward a little bit. I don't know that they're necessarily going to win both games against LA and Columbus, but this is the longest home stretch they've got. This little 3-game run here, and they know that they've got to pick up some points, and it's obvious when you don't win until May that you haven't been picking up enough points, but. This is a great opportunity to do so. And I really think that they've just been needing that sort of confirmation that they're not as bad as it seems. And they're not as bad as it seems. I mean, they are much more talented than their record would indicate. But they just keep having these mistakes and these things. And when the attack hasn't been working, the defensive errors aren't being covered up, essentially. So I think having found a way to get a win at the end of a game instead of finding a way to not win, which has sort of been their, they've been fighting to get draws or giving up goals, to particularly the Seattle game, two late ones, and it's been a frustrating start. So I really think that this is going to give them a huge bump in confidence, and knowing that they don't have to travel, even though the 2 teams that are coming in are pretty good. I think that this is a real morale lifter, and as much as the company line was, we still believe in ourselves and all this kind of stuff. We saw a lot of, even just in the first 8 weeks, a lot of, Will Johnson saying that the team looked amateur, and just some comments that we didn't really hear at all last year, and I thought that they really needed something to kind of have as a rallying point. And while adversity is a nice rallying point sometimes, sort of say, hey, we're all in this together. We need to fight, to turn this around. I think actually getting that result, sort of, you can point to that and say, see, look, we did rally together and turn it around, and now we can kind of take off. So, like I said, I'm not guaranteeing 6 more points or anything like that in a row, but I expect the performances to be better, and to have them at home is a huge bump.
Yeah, if there was a good time to get the LA Galaxy, this might be it. I mean, they come off of a terrible performance against the Rapids. Obviously, Landon Donovan in the record, it may or may not be hanging over his head, and that team is not really clicking right now. So if the Timbers wanted to get the Galaxy, this is probably the right time. The Crew will present a challenge, but I imagine that'll be one of the more fascinating games in a while. But in terms of the tactics on display between Porter and Berhalter, I guess I'm looking at the standings, Mike, and I just wonder, are the Portland Timbers, because I think we have this perception of them, certainly based on last year, and again we've identified some issues, but they have quality in the team. I'm trying to figure out, are they better than 4 other Western Conference teams? Maybe not right now, but are they better over the course of the season? If you believe FC Dallas is going to drop off, maybe there's a spot there. The Rapids, who knows? LA Galaxy are below the line right now. You would expect them to get above it. Are they, for you, better than 4 teams in the West?
I'm honestly not sure yet. I mean, they haven't really played. I mean, the games that they've played against Western Conference teams, one has been against Seattle. And that was at home, and that doesn't matter whether it's home or away. That's that game. But then the other games have been at Colorado, at Dallas, and at Salt Lake, and they've lost them all. And so I don't really know. I feel like I can't judge exactly how good they are or aren't until they start, getting some of these Western Conference teams at home. And that's where they really cleaned up last year. They got a lot more draws than they had in the past. The first 2 seasons in MLS, the Timbers were horrible on the road, absolutely dreadful. And they were much better last year. So, if they can get some draws on the road but just start winning some home games, no team wants to go, until their 5th home game before they win one. I mean, that's just not how you make the playoffs. So, in that regard, I guess they played Chivas and they drew. That was the other game against Western team. So that was a particularly disappointing result in the way that it happened. So for me, they've still got to prove that they belong. I mean, they put themselves kind of behind it a little bit by getting off to a bad start. There's plenty of time to get results, but they actually have to get those results in order to sort of make me and should make anybody believe that they belong in that top 5. And as nice as it was for the Timbers to get a win, they still only have 1 win in 9 games, and it was against DC United without Eddie Johnson at home, and they needed a 94th minute goal to do it. So maybe I think like you said, they've got the talent to compete, and once they if they put it together, I think they will compete. But I want to see them do it against some Western Conference teams that are a little bit better and get some results at home first.
In our last 60 seconds here, one of the things that's distressing for me is sort of had high hopes as a neutral for the Timbers in the Champions League, and now you wonder, can they really afford to focus on that, considering that they're probably going to be in a dogfight for a playoff spot?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that would never have even come up before the season, because I think that the company line was, well, we're going to compete equally for every trophy, because even though Portland finished first in the West last year, that you don't actually get a trophy for that. You have to win the playoff part of the Western Conference. So now that's a really hard trophy to to gun for, especially if you're trying to get into the playoffs and might have might still be going in the Open Cup at that point. So it's going to be a real challenge, and they need some more bodies before that happens. And I expect we'll see some summer moves before the Champions League to bolster that effort.
Interesting. Let's see if the Timbers can turn it around and use this win as a jumping off point for fuller examination of the Portland Timbers. Make sure you check out Michael on Soccer Made in Portland on NASN and read his work at Stumped Out Footy. Thanks for your time, Michael. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, Joe Corona, U.S. men's national team, Tijuana Cholos midfielder, will join us. Talk about life in Tijuana, U.S. national team aspirations. Don't go anywhere. Soccer Morning, North American Soccer Network, NASN.TV.
Welcome back to Soccer Morning on NASN with Jason Davis.
Back on Soccer Morning, we get those phone lines working. Reach out to Joe Corona, Cholos midfielder, U.S. men's national. Hey, Joe, how are you, man?
Good. How are you, man?
I'm good. I appreciate you joining me. It's pretty early on the West Coast. What's your day? What time does your day start?
It's 8 a.m. I mean, good thing I have just trained today. That's it. Nothing bad.
So I got a question. We had Hercules Gomez on the show last week, and I know Herc. He like sat in for a half hour. It was great stuff. Herc is the type of guy that spends like most of his day on Twitter fighting with people. It seems like, and I love Herc, by the way. What do you do with your downtime? If you have training, nothing else for the rest of the day, what do you do?
I mean, I try to get my rest. I mean, most of the time I try to spend it with family, friends. I mean, I consider myself a chill guy, so I just try to keep it cool. And I mean, I always go across the border, go with my family, and just be with them.
That's one of the interesting things I imagine about playing in Tijuana is, and I know Herc talked about living in San Diego. I'm not sure if that's your situation as well, but the kind of the cross the border situation, and Tijuana being the club of a large, of an area in California, is that something that you're cognizant of, something that you're aware of? You talk to a lot of Americans who are Tijuana fans.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think being able to play in Tijuana and to live in San Diego, I mean, it's a privilege. I mean, you're in San Diego, which is beautiful. You have a huge fan base. I mean, there's no soccer team, so Cholos is considered the home team from San Diego as well. That's why there's a lot of people coming down to games every weekend and trying to go and support us.
The Tijuana season comes to an end in the playoffs. I imagine there's plenty of disappointment in the team. When you look at the Clausura, how do you sort of put a bow on it for your side, and how much of your expectations did you guys meet?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, we couldn't get into the next leg. We wanted to make it to semis. I think personally, we should have been there. I mean, I think we played better than Toluca to get into semis, but unlucky we couldn't get in that advantage at home. About Clausura, I think we did a pretty good job. It was hard for us to get a win away. We finally did after so long, and I think that's one of the things that cost us. But I mean, I think overall we did okay. We could have done way better.
Mm-hmm. And there was the Champions League campaign as well, which didn't end up with a trophy. I think a lot of people are sort of struck by how young Cholos is, Joe, and then the amount of success they've been able to have in a short time frame. When you're part of that team and sort of the rapid rise of that club, is that something you're aware of? Because I mean, like, obviously, when you go to Mexico City and you play Club America, you go to Guadalajara and you play Chivas. Those are clubs with 100-year history.
Yeah. I mean, it's incredible what Cholos has done in the past, let's say 5-6 years. I mean, they're 7 years old, so it's everything has happened pretty fast. I mean, getting promoted to first division, becoming a champion, and already in first division. I mean, now that even though it's so young, I mean, a lot of teams from Mexico and I mean, the fan base has earned a lot of respect from Cholos, and I think people, whenever they see the team, they don't see it as a small club anymore. I think we have a lot of respect, and that's why they want to succeed. I mean, people in Tijuana always ask for the best. They always want us up there with the best teams of Mexico. They want to be in first place, and I mean, I think that's pretty cool because even though it's a young team, I think in such a young small time, I mean, it's gotten a lot of respect.
Now, as a guy with a foot in both cultures, a guy who dual international, obviously you're a U.S. international now. does that impact how the fans in Tijuana relate to you at all?
I would say yes. I mean, like I said, Tijuana's close to the border. I mean, there's people coming from everywhere, San Diego, LA, even San Francisco. I mean, there's a lot of fan base up here, and it's cool how every year you see more and more people. I mean, I'm coming into my 5th year with Cholos now, and it's amazing how much support we get from either side of the border.
I got a question from Gringo Mark on Twitter. He wanted to know what it's like playing on the turf there. In MLS, we talk about turf all the time. Everybody hates it. What's the reaction to the turf in Tijuana?
I personally don't really like it. I mean, I've gotten so used to it that for me, I mean, I could say we as a team can take advantage of it. I mean, it's a new turf field. It's nothing like natural grass. I don't think it'll ever be as good for me as natural grass. But I mean, it's something we can take advantage of, and as a team, I think we've earned to do that with Cholos. And I mean, it's not like a huge difference, but I mean, you get used to it, and it's nothing from the other world, you know. I mean, there's a lot of clubs now with turf fields, and Cholos has learned to use its advantages.
You guys have gone through a couple. I mean, this is natural in Mexican soccer. Got a couple of managerial changes. You got Cesar Farias there now after success under Mohamed. What's the major difference in the way these guys are managing Cholos, and how important is it? You know, a philosophy, an idea of how you guys want to go out and play.
Yeah, I mean, with Turco Mohamed, we had a great run. I mean, everybody knows that we did great with the league. We became champs. We also had a good participation in Copa Libertadores. I mean, it was just different, you know. I mean, players left. I mean, key players from when Turco was here left. New players came. I mean, with Farias, we've been getting along very well as well. I think he's the type of guy that wants us to play, wants to be aggressive, and I mean, I think we're getting more of the hand of it. I mean, every time, like I said, it was before this playoffs. We had 3 seasons without going to playoffs, and after becoming a champion, that was pretty disappointing, you know. So, I mean, as a team, we always want to get in there, trying to fight for the championship, and now with Farias, I think we have a chance to do that.
Now, obviously, Cholos has the strong American contingent with you and a couple other guys, and Paulo Arriola is sort of this symbol for players who can be brought up in an MLS system or an American system and jump over and play in Mexico. And I had a couple of people, he's not an example of this, but I had a couple of people ask me whether or not there's an upcoming group of American kids at Cholos. I know that they're trying to go into the United States to find talent, just like all Mexican clubs are. And are you aware of it? Like when it comes to the academy at Cholos, are you aware of the Americans who are there?
I'm not really aware. I mean, I'm aware of the kids that maybe are from the U.S. I mean, from the national team that practice with us, the first team. But I mean, I know that now there's programs up here in San Diego that are looking for talent for Cholos, and I mean, every time they're scouting more kids from the United States, and I think that's pretty amazing. I don't think any club has that scouting system. I mean, I think Cholos is unique for that. You know, they're looking for Mexican American kids that are looking for a dream to play in first division, and I think they're giving the opportunity to a lot of those kids to join the reserves, you know, so that one day maybe they can be in the first team.
With you and Castillo and Greg Garza, Tijuana is sort of the adopted team of U.S. national team fans, and when it comes to the U.S. national team, I have to ask. Well, I mean, the 30-man roster from Jurgen Klinsmann is due very, very shortly. Is that something that's in your mind? Are you aware of it? constantly? I mean, how much of a deal is that in your head on a daily? I could ask you flat out. Do you know if you're on it?
I don't know if I'm on it, to be honest. But yeah, of course, it's on my mind. I mean, I still have a lot of hope. Hopefully, I can make that 30-man roster. I mean, even though we're done with season and most of my teammates are on vacation. I mean, I'm still training, trying to stay safe just in case. I mean, like I said, I haven't lost hope. Hopefully, I make it to the 30-man roster, and then we'll see from there. Yeah, it's something I dream about. I mean, the World Cup is something every player wants to be in. So I'm excited for it, and if Jürgen decides to call me up, I mean, I know I won't disappoint him.
Have you thought about that group that the U.S. is in and how difficult it's going to be? Because there's not a lot of people out there who really think the U.S. can progress. Is the United States national team good enough? Excuse me, to get out of that group with Ghana, Germany, and Portugal?
Yeah. I mean, when the day of the draw, I remember a lot of people, even today, there's a lot of people telling me, "Oh, U.S. group is pretty strong." I mean, you guys think you guys can manage them, but I think I mean it's a very exciting group. I think we have potential. I mean, U.S. is known to play good against big teams, and I think it's going to be a great challenge for the U.S. American team. So hopefully, I mean, I get to be a part of that and we get to the next round.
I appreciate your time. Joe Corona, midfielder for the U.S. national team, and Cholos in Tijuana. Thanks a lot for your time, Joe. Best of luck in the future.
No worries. Thank you.
All right, there goes thanks. There goes Joe Corona. Good chatting with Joe. It's early. I know. I appreciate Joe's time on the West Coast, 8:00 in the morning. Didn't seem entirely thrilled to be getting up and doing an interview, but I appreciate him answering all those questions candidly. We got a couple of minutes left here. Wanted to just wrap up today's program. Fantastic stuff from Jonathan Tannenwald, Michael Orr, and obviously Joe Corona. We're on a Cholos roll. Now we need to get Edgar Castillo. Now we need to get Greg Garza. Now we need to really reach in to that team and get all of these guys on. With the last couple of minutes of the show comes the reminder that Soccer Morning is listener supported. We are working on a lot of things behind the scenes and hope to bring you some big news in the near future. But for the time being, if you're interested in helping out the show, soccermorning.com is where you can go to do that. And if you contributed last month, thank you very much. There's really no other way for me to say it. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I'm sitting here today on May 6th because you guys stepped up in April and made it clear you wanted us to be around. Now our goal is make it to the World Cup, cover the hell out of the World Cup, and then see what happens, right? Then become national, regional internet stars. Maybe that's where's the bar? Internet can you be a regional star on the internet? Probably not, right? You have to be national because the internet's not everywhere. Twitter stars. No, I'm going to be bigger than that. Twitter, social media, something like that. Yeah, 100,000 followers for Soccer Morning. That's our new campaign. Let's go with that. We have 8,200 right now. 8,000 followers to soccermorning.com or Soccer Morning on Twitter. Go follow Soccer Morning on Twitter so we can get to 100,000 by the time the World Cup kicks off. No, that's not going to happen, is it? That's not going to happen. But you guys are fantastic. Thank you very much. Keep spreading the word. We obviously have no advertising budget. We don't have the might of ESPN behind us. We don't have anybody out there spreading the word of the show on our behalf. It's all down to us and our listener base, and you guys have been fantastic helping us out, but we need to make it bigger and better. I like this from Sisu Soccer, from Brock Galvin on Twitter. We'll close out this, going back to the conversation with Jonathan Tannenwald about announcers in the United States and the voices we like to hear call the sport. And again, just to make it very clear, I don't have any issue with ESPN hiring the people they did because all they are doing is demurring to the market. The market in the United States is for British voices. My issue is obviously that we have been conditioned to think that British voices are the best calling the sport in every single case. Not every single case. There are some that are bad. Some people will identify that. But for the most part, we are conditioned. That's all I'll say. But Brock says, why can't you do some games? And I think I would probably suck at it. But I wouldn't mind trying. I really wouldn't. And Sisu Soccer, if Virginia Cavalry ever comes around, that's your chance. They're not too far away. Maybe I can get a gig, do a one-off game for the Virginia Cavalry or something. Or just do a practice broadcast. I need a practice. Maybe we can stream me doing a practice broadcast for like special people. If you guys support the show, I don't think I'm technically allowed to commentate on actual games as they're happening over the internet. I know that people do that internationally for cricket and whatever. I think we'd get in major trouble. But there's ways around these things. Maybe if we can start a campaign, I will attempt to call a game. I'll need a color commentator. I'll need a commentator next to me, or at least helping me out. But I could try Arlo White style. I could try. I suck. Yeah. Callum Williams, our friend in Kansas City, who is a Brit and calls Sporting Kansas City games. I like Callum a lot. Again, Callum, hopefully you're not taking offense, because it's not my issue is not with British broadcasters. My issue is not even with the American public. My issue is people recognizing why they are tuned to a British accent when it comes to football. John Skipper says Brits are the best at it. I think John Skipper's been conditioned. Some of them are the best at it. Some of them are really good. Some Americans are really good too. All right, I've run out of time. I've actually gone over. Thank you to Joe Corona again for joining us. Soccermorning.com, NASN.TV for all your podcasting needs. iTunes ratings and reviews. I haven't seen us in the top podcasts in a while. And I don't know. I think it's really hard because we're daily. I think daily shows have a tough time unless they're like on the actual radio or Sirius or whatever. Well, go to iTunes. That's all I'm saying. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.
Hold out, you run faster. Some gon' grab you, some gon' jump off that bush and grab. Some gon' grab you. Oh, if you need this thing to grab you.